All right, in today's episode, I get to speak with somebody about social media and what's working for physicians on social media. And I want to introduce you to Wendy Margolin. She is with Sparker Marketing, and her and I have worked together on some projects in the past. And I wanted to have her on to talk about social media in 2021 because physicians are realizing now more so than ever, Wendy, that they need to have a presence online because there's so much information, misinformation, disinformation out there, and we want to have a voice so that for one, we can get more patients into our exam rooms and provide care, but also to save ourselves time and the mental anguish of unraveling all of the misinformation that patients are getting. And so I wanted to have you on, Wendy, to kind of talk about what physicians should be doing in 2021 to create engaging content and where to start. So maybe can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this space, and then we can jump into those questions?
Sure. So, yeah, hi there. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you. So, I am, like you said, Wendy Margolin, and I have been doing social media marketing for 14 years, which pretty much makes me a dinosaur in the field. That's about as long as anyone's been doing it. And of those 14 years, I've spent 10 years doing healthcare marketing. So that is social media marketing and blogging and websites and everything. And really, what I've seen is a big change from what used to work when I first started and what I think is working now. So I'm excited to talk to you about that and be able to help your listeners.
So when physicians are thinking about marketing, I think it's difficult because we're so busy as it is, and the idea of like doing TikTok videos and dancing around just is not appealing to anybody, and unsure like even what platforms are best or how to get started. So say I'm a physician in private practice and I want to bring new patients in the door. Where should I start with my journey of establishing an online brand that actually brings new patients in the door?
Right. So you're bringing up a bunch of great points about not wanting, a bunch of points all at once about not wanting to dance and where do you start. So definitely, I think starting is being there. I think the very first step is being committed to it. So when you recognize that social media is a way to get people into your private practice, then the only way to make that work is to make a commitment to it in being consistent and learning what it takes either from someone who gives you the strategy or you taking the time to learn the strategy. So I think that's a really big piece is making that commitment. And in terms of like dancing on reels or doing things or TikTok or anything like that, like I don't think that anybody on social media has to do a specific thing. There are things that work better than others, but it's really about what makes you comfortable. And one of the things that's nice for a doctor is that people, especially with a private practice, so your patients have so many choices of who they could go to. Unless you're in a really small rural community, most times patients have several choices of who to choose. And when you are in a private practice, you have something very different to offer your patients than those who work with physicians in a hospital network or something like that. They are really coming to you specifically for the service and the relationship that you provide to them or their family. And so you have to take what it is that your patients who do know you and like you and trust you, what they appreciate about you, and then just translate that into social media. So you're already doing that in the one-to-one patient care situation. It's a matter of just taking that and putting that into social media in a way that works in that platform.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is use the way that you already practice and the way that you communicate with your patients in order to continue to bring in new patients. And to me, that seems like a great way to do it because it's kind of taking what you already do and purposing that for online. Could you suggest
Exactly.
some specific places? Like, where would I start if I'm starting out and I'm saying, okay, I'm committed to establishing an online presence because I see the value of that and I see what's happening because I'm not out there. Patients aren't coming into my practice. They're getting a lot of information that then I have to spend the exam time unraveling. What platform do I start on? How do I establish that, take that first baby step?
Okay, so baby steps. First, I think would be obviously choosing your platform. So it's going to depend on the age of your patients and decision makers. So, for example, if you are working with seniors, you don't really need to be on Instagram. You would want to focus on Facebook. If you are trying to reach predominantly male patients, then it might even be LinkedIn. If you're trying to reach women, I'd say you know late 40s and younger. So your first and foremost platform would probably be Instagram. And there's a little bit of a different strategy on each of those. And there are reasons to be on all of them, perhaps. So it depends on who you're trying to reach. And then in terms of the baby steps, so what I would recommend is that if you can pick, you know, 5 to 6 consistent themes of content that you can create and try to get up at least a post a day between those 5 to 6 themes, then that's going to already make you pretty consistent. And so the idea of picking themes is that it helps you to just organize the content, and this doesn't have to be you. We can jump into my specific system in a minute, but picking the themes allows you to save a lot of time because you could pick one theme, like maybe the theme is frequently asked questions. So what are the questions that people ask you the most often in your practice? Making that a theme means that you can come up with literally a post a week of the things that people ask you all the time. You already know the answer. You're saying those things all the time. And what happens when you put that on social media is A, you're answering questions people probably have. B, you're helping so many more people all at once. And C, you're showing your authority. You're showing that this is how I answer that question. And especially if like you work in pediatrics, so people really want to know, especially now with the pandemic, they really want to know what you specifically think. So answering those questions does so many things for you and your audience and your community.
Right. I love that approach of I think frequently asked questions is by far the easiest place to
Mhm.
turn because it's the questions that you're getting asked on a regular basis. And if you get asked, 4 times a week about something, then there's 400 other people that have that same question that have never had it answered for them or aren't sure. And so I think that if you can satisfy that itch, scratch that itch that they have, then they'll feel connected to you and like you get them. And the
Right.
easiest thing is you just take the questions that you're getting asked and you write them down as you're going about your day, and then you pick one of those questions and you can dive into it. So it's not like you have to think it up or survey your audience necessarily or anything like that. You can just find out exactly what people are asking and then create that content. And you probably already feel comfortable talking about it because on a regular basis you answer that question. So it's just a little bit of
Exactly.
finessing to make it sound good and work for social media. The other thing that I'll
Exactly.
add to what I talk with other physicians about frequently is they're like, well, do I start on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or wherever? I think just ask your patients, like, where do you get your online information from? If especially you have some good patients that you like and can say, hey, I'm trying to kind of establish myself online so that I can share good information with patients like you. Where do you get your information from? And I think the common denominator is probably Facebook for nearly everybody. And then, like you said, that there are specific platforms that, if it's predominantly females under the age of 40 or 50, then Instagram is a great second place. If you're targeting business people or people that are more professionally oriented, then LinkedIn would be a good choice. I don't see a lot of patients going to Twitter to find their physician. Twitter is more like a hangout rant sort of spot in my mind, but I think Facebook being a good first choice for about everybody, especially because then you can do paid ads to target local audiences with Facebook and get crossover onto Instagram and things like that. I think a lot of people worry they're going to leave opportunity on the table if they're not on every platform. But in trying to be on every platform, often you spread yourself too thin. And, well, I can upload this video to Instagram, but I can't upload it to Twitter because it has to be under 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And on LinkedIn, I can post up to 10 minutes, but on Instagram, blah, 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 blah. There's just so many different variables that it can make it difficult to know where to put your focus.
Right, right. I agree. I think that Twitter is a great place if you're trying to build like national or even international authority and expertise in an area. If you're trying to, attract maybe some journalists, trying to reach out to people like that, then that's a good place. Maybe you have a book that you're really trying to push hard, things like that. So that would only be for someone like that. I actually right now, and this is only if your patients are in a certain great age group, I really am liking Instagram, even for physicians, even more than Facebook. Facebook has really become a place where, yes, you need to be there. You should absolutely have a presence, but you always want one channel where it's your first and foremost focus, because there is a little bit of a nuance in how you create content in each place. And I've been liking Instagram a lot better now. I'm finding that Facebook is very much pay to play. So it's very hard to get followers and engagement on your content. But Instagram is, with its stories and its reels, when you get a little more advanced, it's very easy to move your patients and your potential audience along the sales funnel. There are stickers in there, engagement, and there are ways to get in there and use Instagram to eventually bring people into the office who maybe have just gone from, becoming aware of you to then making an appointment.
Well, let's shift and talk about that then, because I think that's a really important point that you brought up there is like people aren't going to see one post of yours about plantar fasciitis and be like, okay, I got to go see this person because they are just the plantar fasciitis expert. It takes building that relationship, right? So that they see you and they say, oh, this doctor talks a lot about plantar fasciitis. And then eventually leading to the place where, well, mine is kind of acting up and who am I going to pick? Well, I can just ask on Facebook or ask my friends who they see, but I have seen this person's content about plantar fasciitis. How do you go about creating that customer journey for healthcare practices so that people are finding you and then engaging with your content and then getting to the point where they decide to book an appointment with you?
Right. Okay. So good question. Can I walk you through my what I call my everyday marketing system? And that kind of
Please,
tells you this journey. Okay. So
please.
I have a 6-step system that I developed in my work with my clients but just also even in my own personal work, because I have to do the same thing of focusing on my clients, but then promoting my own business. So I'm in the trenches. And the system is one that I developed in 6 steps, focusing on social media. So it's the acronym is PSA and SEL. So the P is for planning, and the S is for scheduling, the A is for ambassadors, and then SEL is stories, engagement, and lock your apps. So I want to walk you through what this system looks like, because it shows you how you can move into a place where you are eventually using social media to walk people through the customer journey. Does it sound good?
PSASEL. Yep, that sounds great. Let's do it.
Right. Okay. So I'll send you this after if you want to put it in the show notes. But okay, so planning is kind of that first thing we talked about. Coming up with content themes. If you're just getting started out, come up with 5 to 6. So it could be like the FAQs we talked about. It could be something like I always like to do healthcare hashtag holidays and just holidays in general. Those are also so easy. And because they're timely, they do well in the algorithms on each of the platforms, because they see that that's something that needs to be shown today, and tomorrow's no longer Martin Luther King Day or Inauguration Day or whatever. So those hashtags are good. You don't want to overuse them, but you should use some, in stories from patients and in your stories. or your other physicians in your practice, like that would be an example. So 5 to 6 themes if you're just starting out. If you've been doing this for a while, I would pick 10 to 12 and you rotate those through. And one of the themes also should always be sales. So how to get people into the door, how to promote what it is right now that you are offering, well visits, flu shots, maybe you're promoting new sick visit hours, some whatever it is. So really focusing on here's what we've got and here's how you get it, and being really direct about that is what sales would be. And so when you have these themes, you're planning content and you're doing content batching, which just really makes it you save a lot of time instead of like, oh no, it's Martin Luther King Day. We didn't let everyone know we're opening late, or I mean, I don't think you're Thanksgiving, and let's use that example. But you're closed. You never put it up, and you forgot to put up when you're opening a little late Friday, and the image, whatever. So that kind of thing of having to like shoot from the hip can take a lot more time. So planning ahead would be the first step. And if you're new, or you've just kind of lost interest and you want to jump back in, that would be a good place to just start there. And then the next step would be if you're able to create all your content ahead of time, and then really, if you do it well, you can schedule it in a social media scheduler. So I know you use SmarterQ, and you actually got me turned on to that. So I use that for myself as well. I also use Hootsuite. If you're going to use Instagram first, I recommend using Later or Planoly. So getting it actually scheduled means that if you have a busy week and you don't touch your social media, you still at least stayed consistent.
Right. I like that because I tell people when I'm talking with them about this that I have Smarter Queue in place, which I use because even if I were to, God forbid, get hit by a bus or something, I would still be posting for weeks and months, and somebody would have to go in and figure out the password and turn it off, because it just allows me to not feel that constant pressure to be putting out new content. If I have a busy week, if I'm not feeling creative or motivated, or I've got something else on my plate, then it just keeps pumping out content to all the platforms that I use without me having to even touch it or do anything. So that is why I like that platform in particular, and I'm glad that you're saying that I got you turned on to that one too, because that one
Yeah,
has been my
yeah,
favorite, Smarter Q.
yeah. We could have a whole nother side conversation about schedulers, which would probably bore your listeners. But one thing that I think is important to bring up, and it does relate to Smarter Queue, is that I like that platform has a pause button. And that pause button has been so important for this crazy year we've been living in, because you saw that businesses who had their content scheduled, and then all of a sudden we moved into a pandemic and they hadn't shut off their pre-scheduled content or emails, and it all went ahead as usual, and they sounded really tone deaf. We had it again with the Black Lives Matter protests. We had it again with the Capitol Hill mob. Like, it's just been a
Yeah.
crazy year, and you needed to act fast if you were in the business of content marketing, and
Right.
turn it off, do whatever you needed to do to respond appropriately. So that's another feature that I
That
really
is
like
one thing
about
that I like
Smarter.
about that. I like that too because you don't then have to, like, you can just be like, okay, push pause on social media. There's something going on the news. I don't want it, talking about plantar fasciitis when the rest of the
Right.
country is talking about some specific hot button issue that's important. I'd rather be quiet and just listen than to put out goofy stuff that is not important at this moment.
Right, right. And you can do that with any scheduler. You would just have to manually reset things to draft, but Smarter Key lets you pause it. So I think that's pretty cool. So that's the first two steps, planning and scheduling. If you're doing that, you're already like so far ahead of most physicians. And that's already a really a positive step in creating content. So the third step in the first category of my 6 steps is ambassadors. And so if you're just starting out and you're the only provider, you're not going to have a social media ambassador. But as a practice builds and you have a few more people in your office, then I highly recommend picking at least one ambassador, if not maybe a few, because the people who you would choose will typically have different shifts. And the social media ambassador's job is to get the day to day content, like the opportunities there are to grab photos, to take fun photos, to maybe every time a client is done with, you brought up the plantar fasciitis, which I can relate to as a runner. So maybe they come back for their final visit and they're done with their treatment and you check them out and they're good to go, like ready to run. Maybe you have like some little tradition of a certain type of photo you take at that moment. So things like that, capturing those kinds of day-to-day things that happen, that would be an ambassador's job. And the person who should have that job is not necessarily the highest person. It doesn't have to be the office manager. It doesn't have to be like a high up person within your practice. It should be the person who's most commonly has their phone at their hip and is doing this for themselves in their own personal life. So I work with one practice where I do all of their social media, and my ambassador there she's a influencer on Instagram with her cat. She has like a Taylor Swift cat or something. So she's the perfect ambassador. She's a nurse practitioner and she's their ambassador, and she's very used to taking, fun little boomerangs and all these just fun videos and capturing fun moments that happen. So that would be, if everybody just had those first 3 steps, plan, schedule, and have an ambassador, then you're already doing a fantastic job on social media.
That is such a great way to set it up. And I think that what that helps me to think about is who else could do that. Well, I know the people in my office that are on social media a lot, because oftentimes, we see them with their phones out or something like that. Why not turn them into the ambassador instead of saying, hey, you got to put your phone away, you can't have your phone out.
Right.
Like, hey, you can use your phone, but you have to use it for good for the office. So take pictures,
Right.
do boomerangs, do reels of things that are going on in the office, because I already know that you know what's going on this platform because you're on it way too much. And so why don't you
Right.
be the one then that puts out content for the office, and here's some guidelines, and I'd like to just kind of see what you're doing for the first bit of time to make sure that it lines up with our professional mission and everything like that. But what then that allows for is somebody else to be in charge of it and keep the day-to-day, so you can focus on your job rather than having to constantly be thinking about new content or taking pictures or putting things up in your Instagram stories or whatever you're doing. So I love the idea of an ambassador. So what I'm hearing in the big picture is, if you start with planning and committing to it, and then you're able to have a schedule that takes the burden off of you from continuously having to put out new content, or you don't put anything out and everybody forgets about you, and then it's like getting back on the starting at the bottom of the mountain and working your way back up, and then having ambassadors which take the load off of you as well by being the ones that continue to put stuff out onto the platforms that your patients are seeing that is relevant, and just pick your younger staff members. They'll be much more savvy at all the social media and be excited to have that job, and they'll probably fight. I mean, if we had that, people would fight over it at our office of who gets to be in charge of our Instagram stories. Like that would be so neat, and I love that idea. So I'm afraid that we're going to run out of time, so I'm going to refer my listeners to the show notes, where I'll put a link so that they can learn the rest of your system, because you said it was PSA SEL, so there's more components to it, and
Right.
it will be an opportunity for them to learn more from you. But I think at the end of the day, what we've discussed is so important going into 2021 and beyond, because there's so much information online. That is where our patients are, whether they're new parents or the 94-year-old grandma or the 55-year-old who's trying to help their 94-year-old mother or help their 22-year-old daughter with learning all those things. All of those different age groups have a presence online, and so that you as the physician can reach them if you can figure out how to do it in a way that works with your lifestyle and the demands of your job. And you've certainly made that easier for us all with this teaching, Wendy. So I'm grateful for you for taking the time to discuss all of those
Sure.
things with us.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. And as far as the other three parts, that's really the taking them along the content journey. So I'm happy to give you that information so you can share all of that with your listeners as well.
Awesome. Well, I will send everyone to Sparker Marketing, and I'll make sure that they can get right to that information so that they can learn the rest of the system of not just how to create the content, but then how to move people along that journey from my foot hurts to I'm going to this specific doctor who I found online to get help for my plantar fasciitis. Thank you so much, Wendy.
Exactly. Sure thing. It's great talking to you. Thanks for having me on.